So, Dusty, how'd your FanDuel do this week?
I don't want to talk about it.
Oh, that good, huh?
You know, sometimes when you're hot, and when you're not, you're not. This has just been one of those weeks I'm like, I probably overbet on some. And when I say overbet, I mean like $3 overbet, you know. But, yeah, let's just say I'm going to have to ask the wife for that $70 back.
Wow.
I just said, yeah, I lost like $20 this week.
Dang, Dusty.
It's the stupid NFL stuff. Like, it's hard.
I know. My team, Devontae Freeman, jacked me up.
Could have used a little run from him.
Had to go off and get a concussion in the first quarter.
Yeah, holy.
Yeah, that hurt me. You should see my team right now. It's looking pretty
well,
painful.
My season-long fantasy team, it's doing fine. Like, I have like a replica WWE belt, and I'm getting ready to make another video of how I'm the champion and just send me your money. Because I'm in first place in one of those leagues and second place in another league. So it's just those daily fantasy things, you know, like it's just so much changing I do on my roster, and then it doesn't even matter.
What about that league that you and I are in together that nobody pays attention to?
I don't know. I like that league because there's no money in it, though, so I kind of don't pay much attention to it. So we'll race real quick, and we'll see who's faster.
Well, I'm 3-12, or I'm third place. So Dusty,
you're 3-12 and in third place.
No, I'm third place. I'm 7-3 in third of 12 people.
Okay, I'm second of 12. I'm 7-3 too, so I just have you in points.
Yeah, but who has who in the matchup? That's all that matters.
Okay, Andrew beat me by like one point.
Hey, I still beat you, though. That's what matters.
And you know what? I'm going to win again this week. It's pretty much a done deal unless Tom Brady goes crazy.
Let's see. How many points? You have 1,080 points. I have 1,042 points. You do have more points against, though. 100 more points against.
Yeah, it means people bring their A game when they... I mean, Tom Brady probably like checks my fantasy team, be like, man, I got to bring my A game. I'm up against D-Dog and Heezy. Actually, my name in most of my leagues are the Hurricanes.
Yeah, what's in this one?
It's American Beer Belly.
There, yeah.
I'm going to CrossFit now. I'm trying to get that worked on.
Now, is it working?
Well, I mean, I'm leaner. I'm just still fat. I can lift heavier stuff, though.
Yeah, well, that's good.
All right, what's on the agenda today, Andrew?
All right, today we're talking about a sermon.
I kind of didn't read, so I mean, I skimmed it.
Right.
But you know, just like I did in my pastor days, I'll just wing it.
Hey, tell us something new.
Something new?
Yeah, because you don't ever read, do you?
Oh, burn.
Today, we're talking about the sermon.
Today, what we're going to do is, since we're giving a sermon, we are collecting tithes and offerings after the podcast today. So you can go ahead and get that ready.
That's right. Make those checks payable to Dusty and Andrew or Bible Belt Bros.
I like how you put my name first, so I can cash it. Yes.
No, because you notice I said Dusty and Andrew means it has to have both signatures. We're going to change up style. Normally we go section by section, and it's just kind of, it's usually somebody else's section on how they contributed to the change, whatever it is that week that we're talking about. This week is the sermon. We're not really going to do that. We're just going to kind of talk about the sermon, kind of talk about what it's like today.
Before we get started, though, Andrew, I'd like to give a shout out to my friend Brad. He shot us a message, some hate mail on Facebook, and it was actually really encouraging mail. And
did you call it hate mail?
You know, but it was the opposite of hate. It was really encouraging. We thank you, Brad, for your support. Give us any ideas of how to make it better. We'd love to do it.
So, anyways, that's what we're going to do today. We're just going to kind of do a little chit chat.
Let's get this party started. Do you need a Slurpee? Get some Mike's Hard Lemonade. Black cherry lemonade.
So, note to self, do not let Dusty have Mike's Hard Lemonade before the show. The chapter is titled The Sermon, Protestantism's Most Sacred Cow. I didn't even know that was a word. Protestantisms? I guess if you add ism after anything, you make it a new word.
Yeah. What did I say? Churchism? No. I said a word.
I've heard you say a lot of words.
Churching. That's what I said.
Oh, yeah, churching.
That has nothing to do with what you just said, so let's just...
But I do remember you saying that. Kind of what I've figured out with reading this book, and that's kind of why we're changing up the style of how we do this, is everything that the book covers comes from a pagan culture. We don't need to ask every week or explain every week how it comes from a pagan culture.
We get it already.
Right. It's a pagan thing. Let's talk about it and how we deal with it today, or how we see it and how we use it. And do we think that it's being done right? Today, it's kind of the same everywhere you go. It doesn't matter if you go to a mega church or if you go to a little country church. The sermon is usually going to be the same. It's
the same structure.
Same structure, right? It's either going to be like a topical sermon or a relational sermon. What type of sermons are there? Other types.
There's what is that called when they go verse by verse? Like you can do like a 24-week study on the Sermon on the Mount starting next Sunday. Don't forget to bring a friend.
Yeah.
So there's that style. There's the
Well, what's your favorite style?
Well, what bothers me, I guess, and what I just am tired of is the preacher voice. You know, like we're talking to each other right now.
Right.
With our own voice. And if I was to talk to any preacher, if we had him on a show right now, they would talk to us in this kind of tone, I guess. And what God wants for you today, brothers and sisters, is to join his family, the family of God. Should I see that hand?
Okay, that works.
That's a little extreme. But
that was a TV Kenneth Copeland?
Yes. But you know what I mean. Like,
right.
They speak, they're using... When I was a associate youth pastor, and I used to have to write sermons, which was like the worst part of my job. Okay?
I agree. I had to do that as well.
Well, because I am not... Like, even now, like, I'm holding my breath. I'm going to have to take a pause here in a second just so I don't pass out. Because I just am not a great public speaker. At least I don't think so. And people will be like, oh, that was a great sermon. And I'm like, yeah, Francis Chan does that better. You know? Like, yeah, like Craig Rochelle, like, he can... I don't know why you're listening to me at this point.
Other than this is where you normally go to church. And
right. And I think they're just being encouraging. And I really do think, God spoke through me or used my words to speak to people's hearts. But
so you're definitely not a sophist then.
What's a sophist?
A sophist. So the sophists were the most distinguished men of their time.
Definitely not me.
No, but essentially what they were is they were very good with words and in front of crowds and in front of people. So essentially they're the like Porsche car salesmen. You know, they're good at what they do. And
they use their emotion response and stuff like that, like trying to speak to you.
Right.
So like a pastor.
Pretty much.
Well, I remember when I was having to write sermons, like I would spend hours like going through just my pauses, going through my inflections of when I'm going to get loud, when I'm going to get soft, and going through how that would sound live in order to try to draw an emotional response, and in order to try to draw people into what I was saying. And that just drives me crazy. Even then, but now it just, the best preachers that I listen to are the ones that feel like they're just talking to me. They're just talking
having a
naturally.
Conversation.
Yeah, they're just having a conversation. And why does it have to be so like,
I've done a lot of speech classes. For some reason, that's prerequisite. You have to learn how to talk in front of people. Anyways, that's one of the main things that they tell you is just act like you're having a conversation with somebody. Don't direct it at them. Just speak with them.
Don't be preaching over people. Yeah. Like,
just speak with them.
Yeah.
That's it. Kind of like what you and I are doing. We're making eye contact. We're talking.
I mean, it's kind of awkward how much eye contact we're making right now.
It's just stop making those googly eyes, Dusty.
They're just my eyes. I just something in them. I gotta blink my eyes back and forth
while reapplying your mascara.
Yeah.
So, what was your favorite sermon that you've given?
My favorite sermon?
Actually, let's go with this one. What was your most memorable?
Oh, shoot. My most memorable one was probably my first sermon I ever did. Like, I had planned, put good 2 days into writing, and finding those perfect, video illustrations. Because I was in youth ministry. You have to have a video illustration. And I was planning about 25, 30-minute sermon. And, man, when I got up there, the video illustration was actually longer than when I spoke. Like, it was probably a 10 to 15-minute sermon altogether. Like, I just all the way through it. And those kind of people probably thought I was speaking in tongues. I was going so fast. And, yeah, it was so embarrassing. It was like, all right. I got up to speak at 7:15. I'm like, all right, it's 7:28. Let's sing another song. Let's fill this time.
And were you playing that night also? Because I know at that point you were singing.
Yeah, I was singing, and that was part of my nervousness was nervousness is because I was playing and leading worship, and so then I had 2 seconds to get the guitar down, find my notes, and try to find where I was, what I was gonna say. Trying to remind myself. I've just been playing 20 minutes of music, trying to figure out what was I gonna say again for 30 minutes. It's a lot like your dad's first sermon. Like, your dad's first sermon was pretty. I mean, I thought it was comical being in the.
It was. It was very comical. He was very nervous. My dad's a redhead, so.
Oh yeah, he's a fiery.
You can imagine how red he turned that night. He temporarily went blind.
He said that he literally went blind. Like, he was like, I was preaching and everything was blurry. Like, you couldn't.
He said it started kind of like the movies. It started on the edges and the blackness just covered up everything.
I remember when he would preach sermons, and it would be this is even a year later. Like, he would actually preach somebody else's sermon, which is, fine, but he would tell their stories word for word, like he was actually there. And it was he's like, I'm going to tell you this story, and it wasn't me, it was somebody else, but I just don't have any better way to explain the story, so just pretend like it was me.
I'm going to say me, but it wasn't me.
So what I did, I took that exact same method, where I would just listen to somebody else's sermon on a topic, and really just, if I really liked that sermon, I really thought it was well done, I would
preach it.
Yeah, preach it to the best of my ability. So I've always struggled with that. To be a good youth pastor, for instance, you have to be able to play guitar. That's what most churches are looking for, somebody that can play guitar to be a youth pastor. And you're also judged on your public speaking ability. I've gone and interviewed for a couple churches, not very many, and that was the two things. I had to lead worship for them, and then I had to preach a sermon for them, and they kind of judged me based on that ability, really.
Right.
And
yeah, because for some reason every church likes to group those two positions together.
Yeah, I think it's just a money saving thing, because they're like, man, we need a worship leader and a youth pastor. Let's just make that the same person and give them double the job responsibilities.
Yeah, but one of them's going to suffer.
Yeah, one of them's going to suffer. And so, because the music that they play in youth ministry, they don't want them to play in the Sunday ministry. Right. And so they had to do totally different song sets.
Well, now it's actually getting reverse anymore.
Right.
The stuff we play on Sundays, we don't necessarily want being played on Wednesdays.
Well, I have been out of youth ministry for a while.
So have I, actually.
I can't
attest to that.
Yeah, attest to that. The only reason I would say that is true is I've played for a couple churches, and it is the talent level is not necessarily there, so you can't. Because music nowadays is not. It's not just 4 chords in a 4/4 beat. There's a lot more to it. And you can't just get away with your 4 chords and not practicing.
Now let's move on to your favorite sermon.
Oh, my favorite sermon.
That you gave.
That I gave? I don't even know if there's a favorite sermon that I gave. The Christian answer would be the ones that people came to Jesus.
Was that your preacher voice? No.
But I mean, obviously, those are good ones. It's usually like the worst sermon I gave. The worse off my sermon was, the better off the response was.
Right.
And I'd like to say that was God, and it probably was, but
I'd like to say it. Well, then say it. It was God.
Well, I was just trying to say it, like, because you kind of use that excuse as a Christian person, also that
Kinda like a crutch.
As a crutch. That's the better terminology. But as far as like, I don't practice, I don't rehearse, I don't work hard to make this good, and so we're just gonna lean on the Lord today. And I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, that's just a crutch, and that drives me crazy.
Drives me crazy also.
Dusty is bothered by that. But probably my favorite sermon that I remember growing up, is not like the good ones. Like they're the ones that things go wrong in. Like I had a youth pastor, and he was preaching. He was so mad, and I don't even know what he was preaching about. Because that really doesn't matter. It was what happened, and he hit his podium like boom, and his notes just went flying everywhere, and the podium actually like broke in half, like the top half fell off. There's a wooden podium, and he just kind of like gave it like a little look and kind of like, yeah, I broke that, and just kept preaching. Like I remember everybody was like, oh my God, we're gonna die, like we're totally in trouble for all of our sins.
So you came for a Wednesday night service and you got a power team show.
Exactly. We got a power team show, and that's probably one that's just, stuck in my mind forever. It's just funny.
I know that we're, changing up the style and all this, but I think we still need to talk about the book a little, Dusty.
Okay.
So, great job with your sermon stories. I'm sure I'll have some more later. I do remember I was at work at AT&T, with actually Alltel at that time, and you text me. You're like, hey, I'm doing my first sermon. And I was like, oh, hey, I'm going to try and be there. Yeah, I don't think I didn't make it.
Do you remember me like, hey, you remember you preached a sermon one time? Can I have a copy of that?
I do remember that too. Yes.
I've done that before.
Yes. So the sermon, it's like clockwork. Every Sunday, same thing happens. Pastor steps up to the pulpit in front of an audience, a very passive audience who's just there to listen. Very, not like the early church where they all contributed.
There's no discussion.
Right, there's no discussion.
We're just sitting and listening and taking his word for truth, which is kind of
stupid.
Yes. I was going to say more like, it's just funny, because all these churches have pastors that are hearing from the Lord, their job is to be in tune with God, basically.
Right.
And they're giving these sermons they're giving sermons interpreting God's word for us and how it applies to our lives. Yet there's so many different interpretations of that word. It just drives me like
bananas.
Bananas. Yes, it drives me bananas. Like, it's just...
Were you a cheerleader, Dusty? I went to school with you, but did you have this hidden talent?
No, but that probably would have been a good idea to be a cheerleader. I would have probably had to hit it better with the ladies in high school. I was kind of a nerd with my bowl cut and everything going on.
I can attest to that.
It was cool when the Backstreet Boys were out there, but once they kind of died off, I probably should have cut my hair.
Right. So, as I was saying, the pastor steps up to his pulpit to deliver this inspirational talk to everyone. It's the same thing every Sunday. And so, where did this come from? And that's what this chapter talks to us about.
Well, and I had heard that it came from the Enlightenment period, where education was the cornerstone of our culture, and so we replaced the 5-minute spiritual readings with 45-minute lectures like they do in college. But that's really not what this book. It went to a Greek thing, right?
Right, a Roman Greek thing. Actually, what this book first talks about, I believe, what it first talks about is it actually came from the Old Testament, where God preached and taught, or men of God preached and taught. But it wasn't necessarily a sermon. And then when
It's more like a scriptural reading and interpretation.
Right.
Okay.
And then when Jesus came, again, he didn't preach a regular sermon. He did preach, but not to the same audience.
Well, it wasn't to the same audience. It wasn't at the same time every week. It wasn't at the same place every week.
It was actually, normally multiple times a day.
Right. He was an evangelist. And there's a difference between an evangelist and a preacher.
Right. The apostles, their Acts shows us that the preaching was sporadic. It was delivered on special occasions in order to deal with specific problems, stuff like that. And it was more of a dialogue, not a monologue.
Right.
Then the next section is where it tells us that it came from the Greek culture. And, of course, it was...
Those Greeks, messed everything up
right
in the church.
They were pagans.
Them pagan people.
Yeah, so it was taken from the Greek culture. It doesn't exactly say how it was taken from the Greek culture, though. It just says it was taken from a pool of Greek culture. And then the book goes on to talk about, in the 5th century, there were these wandering teachers, and they were called sophists. And really, they're accredited for inventing rhetoric, which is persuasive speaking.
Right, using
car salesman
emotion, emotional responses. I wonder if they had video illustrations back then.
I bet they did not.
They probably had fire and
hieroglyphics.
Yeah. The haze the Lord.
Now, when I was reading this, I kind of thought of myself as a sophist.
You do speak a bunch of bullcrap.
Yes, that's exactly it. Because sophists were expert debaters, masters at using emotional appeal, physical appearance. Definitely I have that.
So Andrew is a master debater. He loves to he loves to argue about anything. That's Andrew's.
I do not.
That's Andrew's worst characteristic, I think, is he will do something just because you tell him not to, and he will argue his way into saying why it's right.
That's right, and I will get you to agree with me.
I don't know if you'll necessarily get me to agree with you, but you'll get me to just stop trying because it's not going to work.
Even better. So sophists were regularly identified by their special clothing. They wore the finest linens and all that. So, I wear some sick threads, just saying.
I'm sorry, I'm still laughing. Sick threads?
Some sick threads.
Oh, man. As you're in your sweatpants and Thunder t-shirt, you're wearing some sick threads.
Yes. I'm actually surprised you're not in a tank top today.
Shut your mouth. It is cold outside.
But it's not cold at your office.
Okay, in a tank top, I look like a junior high kid. My arms aren't that big.
Fat junior high kid.
Junior high kid with boobs, and I'm so terrible.
I seriously.
But I don't say I have sick threads.
Hey,
oh my God.
These are Nikes.
They're still sweatpants.
Exactly.
Nikes from Walmart?
No, actually, they were a gift. So I don't know where they came from. Does Walmart even sell Nike?
I have no idea.
I don't think they do. That would compete with their brand too much. All right, now Dusty has that laughing spell out. We can go on with the show. So what was your worst sermon, Dusty?
All of them. The worst sermon I gave?
Yes.
I don't know. There's just so many that I felt so unprepared for. That, like my thought, I follow Seth Godin a lot. He's kind of like a marketing kind of guy, ask questions kind of guy. And he talks about like with our school system and, just what's wrong with it. It's built for the wrong time period. It's built for the industrial time period where people just like grow up learning to follow commands and never to go outside of those commands and create something awesome. So then once they get into school and college, they can go into a job and do exactly what they're told. They're not in the problem with the school system, as he was saying was, and I'm probably butchering it. I'm going to probably get a nasty email from him, which would be awesome because then he was like, oh, he listened. But what he's saying is that teachers spend 8 classes a day, just taking most of the time in their class to teach a lesson, the same lesson 8 times a day. What if they were able to have somebody give that lesson, a great gifting communicator, even on a video or whatever, give a lesson, and the teacher has 30, 45 minutes in their class to help them understand what they're learning instead of, all right, go home and remember this.
Because you can't mold everybody together. I don't agree with him at all on that. Well, you've talked about this before, and I've researched it. So that's why I
let me talk.
No, you took a breath.
Stop master debating me.
You took a breath and gave me time to jump in.
Okay. Well, now you are gone. So I was thinking, what if I just showed a video of a preacher giving a sermon about the topic that I'm giving, and can do it awesomely and not suckily like I was doing.
You make up the weirdest words.
And what if then I can have maybe the time to kind of wrap it up and kind of dumb it down to the level of maybe we're at our church or in our lives. And instead of just trying to give a sermon, and that's basically what I was trying to do, but failing, I feel, really badly at it. I was trying to take a sermon that really impacted me, dumb it down to their level, when I didn't really need to dumb it down, but help them maybe apply it more instead of give it to them. All right, see you next week.
Right.
I don't know. And maybe if you listen to the Seth Godin thing and not just me trying to explain it, would help you better on our school system talk stuff.
I don't think you can use a video to teach somebody, because kids are going to ask questions while the teacher's teaching because they're not going to understand it and they're going to need better clarification.
Okay, well, here's the thing. Like, most of the time, though, when a preacher's preaching or a teacher's teaching, you hold your questions to the end.
I've never held a question until the end when the teacher is teaching.
Yeah.
Because a teacher
How did your teachers love that?
They always have open dialogue. Because
where you're at?
Everywhere.
Even
when we went to high school. You could ask teachers anything.
Most of the time I was asking, like, tell me a hunting story, so then he would forget that we had a test today. And it worked, like, 30% of the time.
No, I'd say it worked 90% of the time.
I was trying to be nice.
Because he just didn't want to give tests.
Yeah, he was a great teacher. No, I didn't learn anything.
Actually, he was a horrible teacher. He was a great person.
I was a great teacher, I just didn't learn anything.
He never wanted to teach. So teaching aspect, no, he wasn't. I don't agree. Anyways, I won't debate that topic because I love him. He was a great man.
Yeah.
He was one of my favorite teachers because I hated doing homework and all that, and so he didn't assign much. Well, obviously, that's not so he didn't assign much.
Right.
But he didn't assign much. That's why I liked him so much.
What are we talking about?
However, one of my favorite teachers was one of our algebra teachers.
Oh, gosh. I didn't learn anything in that class either.
You had...
Mr. Jones?
Oh, you had him. No.
Mr. Jones!
The other one.
I don't know the other one.
Miller.
See, okay. I had Mr. Miller in Algebra 2, and he was so mad at everybody because everybody in my class was from Algebra 1, Mr. Jones' class, and so we didn't know anything.
Learn nothing.
So he was so ticked off at us every day.
Right. I had Woods for Algebra 1.
Okay, quick story. In Algebra 1, I had this teacher who was a retired military guy, just wanted to teach. He actually told us to smoke up because he had investments in cigarettes. And so he basically spent most of his days, we played chess and checkers.
Talking about his Thunderbirds. He would always be like, hey, I'm going to go back here, check my stock, see how good you guys are smoking up. If you need any of the answers are in this book up here, feel free. And so, obviously, we get that answers. Somehow, I still was failing by the end of the year. And so, he was like, hey, here's the grade book up here. I'm going to go check all my stocks, maybe play some checkers if anybody wants to play. Take a look at your grade. If you feel like there's something I missed, just go ahead and change it. And this kid, Scott Hicks, was like, shout out to Scott Hicks. He was up there, and he said, hey, Dusty, you got an F. Do you want an A? And I was like, give me a C-, just to be realistic. And so I passed Algebra 1 because Scott Hicks changed my grade. Man.
So no wonder I didn't know anything in Algebra 2.
Dang. See, you could have done my routes. Here's my route, Dusty. Here's how stupid I was in high school. I just knew that you needed, 3.5 credits or 3 credits of math. I would just say 3 because I didn't have to take it in my senior year. So what I did is I took Algebra 1. The next year, I was like, I don't want to take Algebra 2, so I took pre-algebra. The next year, I took basic math.
Oh my gosh. So I could have, what's really funny is, I barely passed Algebra 1. Right. In geometry, you actually graded your own homework assignments. And so I had like 100%, or really trying to make it realistic, 90% on my homework. But I failed every test, and my algebra teacher was like, I don't understand why you're failing your test. You're doing great on your homework assignments. And I'm like, yeah, I don't have a clue either. Anyway, so of all this stuff, and it's not just math class. It's like every class. I'm a really dumb guy here, but I could have graduated a semester early in high school. But I had a girlfriend, so I didn't.
Again, dumb guy.
So it's just, our high school was just a joke.
It really was. But again, Miller was one of my favorites because he actually cared.
He did care.
And he assigned homework. I hated it. I always did it. Didn't do well on it. And his tests were hard. At that point, they were hard. I've taken some tests since then. Oh my goodness, would make his test cry. Matter of fact, the test I took last week would make his test cry.
Well, you're in college and not a freshman in high school.
This is true. Anyway, so that's our high school career.
Hound dogs. Whoop, whoop. Oh, one of the things that stood out to me in a book, Andrew. Can I just talk about this?
Yeah.
I have no idea where we're at right now.
Yeah.
So, page 99. It's just talking about different things that the sermon does, and kind of in a negative side. It says, today's sermon is often impractical. Countless preachers speak as experts on that which they have never experienced. And I was just kind of thinking through that.
Ooh.
And he's like, that's true. I think with the idea of the early church is that somebody that struggles with suicide, they can give a testimony on their struggle with suicide and what's bringing them through. But if somebody who's never struggled with suicide tries to tell somebody who's suicidal that it's going to be okay, you kind of take that like, whatever, bro.
Kind of like a slap in the face.
Right. And so I'm thinking like in today's world, you have homosexuality is a big thing in today's world.
Right.
And we have countless preachers who have probably, at least publicly, never admitted that they struggle with homosexuality.
I like how you put that, at least publicly.
And so because they don't have a public struggle of that, if you struggle with that, you're not really going to listen to it. And I don't blame you for not listening to somebody who's trying to tell you how it is, and yet they have no idea the feelings that you're going through, the pressure that you're going through, all that stuff. And it's kind of like people that try to buy T-shirts from me at our T-shirt shop. Like, it just drives me crazy. People that buy T-shirts all the time, they think they know, like, hey, we just need 20 T-shirts. That should take no time. No, that takes a lot of time. You don't know what I actually have to do on the the back end of it. You just say, hey, I want shirts now. Can I have them tomorrow? And it just drives me crazy. People that feel like, and they think that they know everything when they actually have no idea how to do anything. And I think that's the same thing that kind of happens in the pulpit, is preachers that, because they've read a couple things online and maybe read a book about something, they are now an expert in that idea or that area or topic that they're talking about. And I guess that kind of drives me crazy, because now we have to take their word as written in stone, and yet we might have a preacher over here that says something exactly the opposite of it. They might even be in the same church and they disagree on the topic, but since this guy did it from the stage, he's the one we're going to listen to.
Right.
So I think that's one thing about the sermon that kind of stood out to me when this book was talking about it. Like, man, I see that a lot, you know.
I like that, because that also, I mean, that hits home with a few topics that, you know, like drinking.
Right. I go to Celebrate Recovery, which is a Christian 12-step group for like just people recovering from whatever, which if you were really honest with yourself, we're all struggling with something, and we're all recovering from something. So, and that's the thing. They have a testimony night once or twice a month. I think it's twice a month, that they'll have somebody give a testimony of their struggle with porn, or their struggle with drugs, or their struggle with alcohol or anger or codependency. And in those moments, you can kind of relate to that person, and you can say, hey, that guy or girl is getting through this situation. I'm struggling with this situation. Maybe it is possible, you know? And so, but if you just get somebody teaching the 12 principles of how to get out of a codependent relationship, you're not going to really, like, you're going to think, yeah, those are right, but you're not really going to like totally
apply it.
Right. Yeah, apply it. Because your first thing is like, they have no idea what I'm going through.
That's kind of like in movies, you know, seeing that I was in the military, I know, you know, quite a bit about uniforms and all that. And so every movie that has anybody in uniform, I'm always looking for the things to pull out and pick apart. I'm like, whatever, this is so unrealistic.
That is not a general tag.
I know that M16 does not shoot 2 miles.
Right. Yeah.
Effectively. And so, I may get hit with a bullet from an M16 2 miles away, but it's going to bounce off me. It's not going to blow my head off. So, I understand what you're talking about. But I just had to dumb it down, what you said. Put it in my layman terms.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things it said, actually on page 98, I kind of skipped ahead, but the sermon creates an excessive and pathological dependency on the clergy. So when your pastor is the main speaker, above 50% of the time, which most of them are about 95% of the time, that anytime we have an issue or anytime we're going through something, he's the one
who gets the call.
He's the one who, because that person, obviously, they know a lot,
Right.
And so they're the religious specialists, is what they call it. And so everybody else who has the same access to God, the same, everybody else is treated like a kind of a second-class Christian.
I agree.
And
yep.
That's kind of, I never thought of it that way, that having a preacher, pastor, clergy member preaching a sermon every day just makes them the spotlight of all religious knowledge, in a sense.
Now, see, I don't necessarily call my pastor for religious reasons, but, when I do have problems going on, he is usually one of my first calls. But that's mainly because, one, I've known him for so long, and my wife has known him for so long, so we both trust him. But usually if it's a religious issue, I'm calling my mom.
Your mom?
Or my dad. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it could not necessarily be a religious issue, but it could be something.
A social issue. Really what you also just described is the pastor forms a codependent relationship.
Yeah.
Or actually the people in the audience, it forms a codependent relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So really, we all need Celebrate Recovery
Because we're all codependent on our pastor.
The pastor, right?
And there is some truth to that. There is a truth to the fact that, being able just to listen to a sermon, because if you're sleeping with your girlfriend, you just know that if they're talking about a sermon series on relationships, you probably should just skip that one, and then you won't get. And I remember as a associate youth pastor that I feel like I'm name dropping when I say associate youth pastor, but whatever. But I remember I would have to go away like once or twice a year and plan a semester's worth of sermon topics, and that was kind of when you're in a more of a progressive church that has video illustrations and stuff and logos and all this stuff, well, that takes time. So you got to be way ahead of schedule so that your people can get stuff designed for you. And so I remember having to do that, like planning out a good 3 to 5 months worth of sermon, at least topics. So it's kind of like, are you really hearing? We're kind of designing it as we want to get them from point A to point B. And so these are the sermons that are going to get us here. But we're not really relying on the Holy Spirit to, obviously he can interrupt us if we wanted him to, but how often does that happen? Not very.
Yeah, realistically, not much. But now, unrealistically, we say it happens all the time.
Yeah. I do want to say one thing. I was challenged to read Acts chapter 2, because we talked about, a couple episodes ago, we talked about the church building and how in the New Testament they didn't meet in the temple.
Right.
And then they met in homes. And so I kind of want to read this because it did make me think, and I did have to kind of go around and look at different verses, reference verses and stuff. So I didn't dive into it like crazily, but
crazily.
Another word.
Dusty
I should start trademarking these things. I didn't dive into it like super deep, but I did look up the reference verses to kind of maybe see an idea what it's talking about. But so it goes Acts chapter 2, verse let's see. We'll start at verse 44. So all the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions and gave to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily who were being saved. So they took that verse and basically were saying, see, they did meet in the temple.
In the courts of the temple.
Well, and so I was just looking up the different reference verses to what that meant. And what it seems to me is it wasn't a structured, like there's times where Paul went to the temple because that was the time of prayer.
Right.
But he went there not invited to publicly speak. Like the priests were mad at Paul, like when he was there preaching. And so what it seems to me was that was just a central place that they could meet. It wasn't like, hey, we need to meet in this temple. It was like, hey, we're meeting in the temple. We're going to tell other people about Christ. And the temple courts is even outside the temple. It's not like the main service that's going on or whatever.
Right. And actually, I took a humanities history class that actually really touched this over the summer. And I learned a lot from it.
So you're an expert now.
Yeah, subject matter expert right here going on. All right, so when it refers to temple courts, well, first, when it refers to temples, it's not referring to a building. It's actually a compound. These temples were surrounded by other buildings and courtyards, and some had marketplaces attached to them. So it's really this big, huge compound that had like 8 to 10 to 12 different buildings in it, and the centerpiece was this big, huge temple.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of what I've figured out. And so when you read it, and it said temple courts, they could have been out the marketplace within the temple compound.
Right.
I mean, they could have been anywhere. They could have been in one of those other 8 to 10 buildings. So, yeah, I don't believe that they met. Well, actually, I know they didn't meet in a temple for a structured sermon. They would meet there for prayer and all that, but I don't think it was for a temple or like a structured sermon.
Actual verse, but in Acts it also talked about when Paul was going to the temple because it was the time of prayer, and when he was in there, he began teaching and preaching, and the priests actually got mad at him and were trying to get him in the jail, and Paul slid by, disappeared. And so to me, that was just kind of like, that was a reference to kind of that verse. And so that, to me, that kind of assumed that they weren't necessarily there as an obligation of this is where they need to worship, but more that they were there because this is where people who are being lied to are. This is where the people are that need to hear.
They're being led astray.
They need to hear Jesus. And you're going to find these people here at this time every day to pray. And so, to me, that's what I kind of got out of it, was they went to the temple, but it wasn't because they needed to go to the temple to hear the word of God. They went to the temple because people were there lost.
Were these, Protestant temples or Christian temples?
No, they were
like Catholic temples, like
Judaism, right?
Okay, Judaism.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like right after Jesus had left. And so, I mean, they're basically reading the scriptures of the Old Testament there. And they're there saying, no, Jesus came. He fulfilled these prophecies.
I was just trying to figure it out, because if they were being chased out by a priest, what was that priest there to do? But then we also did find out earlier in the book, or I think even in that same chapter, that other religions did meet at their temples. Mm-hmm. Like,
I think there was, in Judaism, there's still a priest there that would read the scrolls and
interpret them,
things like that. But I think the point of the book was trying to get was that once Jesus came, he was the priest, he was the temple. We are now the
priest and the temple.
And so we have access to God. We don't need a temple to get access to God.
Right.
And we don't need a priest to pray for us or to help us.
Or to bless us.
To bless us. We have that access to God, that relationship with God. And so the idea is we don't need that. And I don't think most churches say that we need that even now. Like, I don't think we'd go to our church and our pastor's going to say, you need me to help you with your relationship with God. But I think it's structured that way, that most churches are structured that way, that we feel like we need them. We feel like we don't have the answers, but they do. So what do they say about a topic?
Right.
What does this book say? What does this preacher say? But what we end up finding is all these preachers that are led by the Spirit have completely different viewpoints on things. And so how much of it is led by the Spirit and how much of it is personal preference? I don't know. Just things that make you go,
Right. Really make you think. Well, that's going to do it for us this week. Join us next week. We will be going over the pastor.
Well, we appreciate you guys listening to our podcast. If you can, hit subscribe if you haven't already. And we don't have any reviews yet, so hit that review button. Write a couple nice reviews, 5 stars preferred, and be our best friends. That's what you get for that. Also, check out our friends over at the Real Life Podcast. But if you want more conversations like the ones that we're having here, they're a great podcast to go to for that.
Right, and if you'd like to this style, opposed to how we normally do it, let us know.
Let us know.
We're always changing. Trying to figure out what is going to work for us and what doesn't. But have a great week, guys.
Bible Belt.